When she first entered my study, I did not see fear, not in the ordinary sense. She walked with the composure of one who has faced storms and still dared to remain standing. Yet there was something in her eyes, a trembling that was not born from the outer world, but from the depth of the inner one. "I am not afraid of darkness, doctor," she told me, "but I am afraid of what lives inside me." In that moment, I understood. She was not at war with the world, she was at war with herself, and that is a far more terrifying conflict. Most people come to me seeking light. They wish to banish their shadows, to dissolve pain, to become pure again. But she came seeking understanding. She wanted to see what she had spent her whole life avoiding. The feminine psyche, when it awakens to its own depths, does not run from the dark. It enters it. It is not purity that redeems her. It is wholeness. As she spoke, she told me of her childhood, how she had been taught to be gentle, obedient, good, to smile when hurting, to please when aching. She became a reflection of what others desired, and in doing so, she lost her own image. Every time she tried to assert herself, her truth, her desire, her anger, she was told it was unladylike. So she buried it. She learned to smile instead of scream, to care instead of confront. And slowly, the woman she truly was began to disappear behind the woman she thought she should be. Now, in the middle of her life, that buried self had begun to stir again. At night, she dreamt of mirrors that shattered when she looked into them. She saw herself standing before a great sea, but when she reached down to touch the water, the reflection staring back was a stranger. I told her, "The darkness you fear is not evil. It is merely what you have not yet loved." The feminine shadow, it is not wickedness, but unlived life. All that she denied in herself, her rage, her passion, her hunger for truth, had gone underground, growing strong in silence. And now it called her. She spoke of love, a man she once gave everything to. She became his light, his comfort, his healer. And in doing so, she forgot that she too needed healing. He left her not because he did not love her, but because he could not bear to face the power that her love reflected back at him. "He said I was too much," she whispered. I nodded. "Perhaps he saw in you what he could not face in himself." For the feminine has always been a mirror, reflecting not only beauty, but truth. And truth is rarely comfortable. In her dreams, a woman in black began appearing, silent, radiant, and fierce. She frightens me, but she also feels like me. This is how the shadow begins its work. It does not come to destroy you, it comes to complete you. The dark woman in her dreams was not an enemy, she was her own soul calling her home. "She is the one who was banished," I told her, "the one who speaks the truths you buried." When the session ended, she turned toward the mirror in my study. For a moment, she hesitated, then met her own gaze. And though tears filled her eyes, she did not look away. That was the first time she faced herself. And in that simple act, a lifetime of silence began to break. When she returned, her eyes had changed. There was a stillness in them now, not peace, but the quiet before a storm. "I've been dreaming again," she said. I asked, "Of the woman in black?" She nodded. "She took me to a place underground. It was cold, but familiar. I saw pieces of myself, laughter, rage, wildness, all chained to the walls." I told her, You are entering your shadow. Few journeys are more sacred or more dangerous than this one. The descent into one's own unconscious is the oldest of all pilgrimages. And the feminine travels it not by reason, but by intuition. Her soul had begun to remember what her mind had forgotten, that light is born within darkness, not apart from it. In every woman there lives two currents, one of compassion and one of destruction. The world praises her gentleness, but punishes her power. It tells her she must always nurture, never rage, always give, never take. But nature herself does not abide by such rules. The ocean calms and devours. The moon illuminates and conceals. To deny the destructive force within the feminine is to make her incomplete, a shadow of herself. She began to dream of the sea again. Only this time, she did not stand at its edge. She walked into it. The waves rose like dark silk, wrapping around her as if claiming their own. I wasn't afraid, she told me, but I thought I might drown. Perhaps you must, I said. For what is drowning if not surrender to depth? The following weeks were not kind to her. Her moods became unpredictable. She laughed and cried in the same breath. Old wounds reopened. Memories she had sealed away began to whisper. Once she spoke of her mother, a woman who never allowed herself to feel anger, who smiled even as her heart broke. I became her mirror, she realized. I lived her silence. Here was the generational shadow, the inheritance of repression passed down like an heirloom. To heal oneself is often to grieve for the women who could not. You carry their unlived emotions, I told her, and now you must live them, not out of rebellion, but redemption. One evening she came with a trembling in her hands. She said she'd looked into the mirror again, and this time she did not see one woman, but two. One of them smiled. The other just stared at me with pity. I said nothing. The psyche was showing her what she needed to see. The woman who smiled was her persona, the mask she wore for the world. The one who pitied her was her soul, watching the performance of a life lived half asleep. She asked me, she said softly, "Why do you fear your own fire?" And there it was, the heart of the feminine wound. For centuries, woman has been told that her passion is dangerous, her wisdom suspect, her instinct irrational. And so she split herself, the good and the forbidden, the saint and the witch, the light and the dark. I told her, integration begins when you stop deciding which parts of yourself deserve to exist. She closed her eyes, and tears rolled silently down her face. In those tears, I saw the soul's baptism, not by purity, but by truth. It is a painful alchemy, the moment a woman ceases to please and begins to feel. The moment she realizes that healing is not comfort, but confrontation. That night, she dreamt of fire. The woman in black stood beside the flames, motionless. "Are you not afraid?" my patient asked. The woman smiled and stepped into the fire. When she awoke, Her pillow was wet with tears. But she told me, "I think I understand now." She wasn't burning. She was becoming light. Thus, she began her descent, not as a victim, but as a seeker. And I, who had studied the labyrinths of the human soul for years, watched in awe. For there is nothing more powerful than a woman who has stopped fearing her own reflection. When she next entered my study, I sensed it before she spoke. Something within her had shifted. Her presence carried both gravity and grace, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. She said, "The dreams have changed." I asked, "How so?" "She no longer hides in the shadows," she whispered. "Now she stands in the open. She looks like me, but older, wiser, unafraid." This, I knew, was the beginning of integration, when the shadow ceases to be a stranger and begins to take her rightful place beside the self. She told me that in her latest dream, she found herself standing in front of a vast mirror, not glass, but water, still and deep. The woman in black appeared again, holding a lantern. "Look," she said. The reflection that gazed back at her was radiant, neither saint nor sinner, neither light nor dark, but whole. "I felt something rise inside me," she said, "like a force I had buried for centuries. It was power, but not power over anyone, power within." I nodded. "You were seeing the true nature of the feminine, creative and destructive, nurturing and fierce, life itself. Few understand that the feminine soul is not meant to be pure, but whole. Purity, as the world defines it, is obedience, the erasure of instinct, the silencing of the wild heart. But wholeness, that is something else entirely. Wholeness means to hold the opposites, to love and still burn, to heal and still rage, to forgive and still remember. It means to sit beside the flame and say, "I am both the fire and the one it consumes." She began to remember pieces of herself she had disowned. The sensual woman who had been shamed into silence, the angry woman who had been told to smile, the intuitive woman who had been taught to doubt her knowing. Each fragment returned like a bird coming home to its nest. She said, "I feel heavy, but it's not sadness, it's fullness." "Yes," I told her, "that is the weight of being real." The transformation of the feminine psyche is not a gentle unfolding. It is a storm, a death, and a rebirth. And within that chaos, her consciousness was expanding. She began to see how every man she had ever loved had mirrored her own inner struggle, the one who needed saving, the one who feared her fire, the one who used her light to escape his own darkness. She no longer hated them for it. Instead, she saw that they were each fragments of her own inner masculine, her animus, seeking integration. For the feminine must not only awaken herself, she must reconcile with the masculine within her. Otherwise, she will continue to meet her own unhealed reflection in every man who cannot stay. She said, "I think I've been trying to heal men so that I didn't have to face my own pain."
I said softly, "And now?" She smiled faintly. "Now I let them be broken, and I let myself be whole." That night, her dream returned again to the fire. The woman in black stood in the center, unburned. "Why did you hide from me so long?" my patient asked. The woman's voice was like wind through old trees. "Because you only wanted to be light, and I am the dark that makes you real." She woke trembling, but not from fear, from understanding. She came to see that love, in its truest form, is not the merging of two halves, but the meeting of two wholes. And only a woman who has embraced her shadow can love without losing herself. In our final session that season, she said something I will never forget. She told me, "I used to think I was broken, but now I see I was only buried." She paused, her eyes shining. "The darkness wasn't my enemy, it was my womb." I watched her leave that day, not as the fragile self who once trembled before her reflection, but as a woman reborn from her own ashes, fierce, alive, and whole.
It was winter when she returned. The air outside carried the scent of endings, the slow decay that precedes rebirth. She sat before me in silence for a long while, her gaze steady, almost serene. There was no longer a tremor in her voice. When she finally spoke, it was not to tell me a dream, but a truth. "I am not afraid anymore," she said. "Not of love, not of men, not even of myself." It is a rare thing to witness, a soul that has descended into its own abyss and returned, not unscathed, but transformed. I looked at her, and in that moment I understood something anew about the feminine soul. She does not awaken through safety, but through surrender. Her journey had taken her through every chamber of her being: love, loss, rage, desire, silence, until nothing false remained. And what emerged from that fire was not a saint, nor a victim, but a woman who could stand alone in her own darkness and call it home. She told me, "I used to think I had to be light to be loved. Now I know. Love begins when you stop running from the night." She had begun to live differently too. She no longer molded herself to be acceptable. She allowed herself to be real. Her relationships grew fewer, but deeper. Her words carried the gravity of someone who had seen death and chosen life anyway. There was a new beauty in her, not the delicate kind born of youth, but the quiet radiance that comes only from truth. She told me of a dream that marked her final passage. She stood at the edge of a vast field beneath a full moon. The woman in black approached, but this time she was not separate. "She walked into me," my patient said softly, "and I became her." When she woke, she felt no fear, only stillness. She realized that the shadow she had spent her life resisting was not darkness at all, but depth. The moon, she said, had never shone brighter. In Jungian language, this is the union of the opposites, the sacred marriage between the conscious and the unconscious, the self and the shadow, the light and the night. It is the alchemy of the soul. And when it occurs, a woman does not become good, she becomes whole. She no longer seeks to be understood, for she understands herself. She no longer begs to be seen, for she sees. She does not seek the light anymore, because she has become the lamp. One evening, as our sessions came to a close, she said something that I still return to in my thoughts. "Perhaps the world fears women like me," she said. I asked, "Why do you think that is?" She smiled, almost gently. "Because we remind it that love without darkness is an illusion." As she left my study for the last time, I watched her disappear into the night, not as a figure swallowed by darkness, but as part of it. The shadows seemed to open for her, embracing her like kin. And I realized she had not conquered her fear. She had outgrown it. We often imagine the feminine as fragile, as something to be protected. But true femininity, the ancient, instinctive lunar force, needs no protection. It is the storm and the stillness both. The woman who knows her own darkness becomes untouchable, not because she is hard, but because she is whole. She walks through the night, and the night bows to her, for she has become its mirror and its light. And so it ends not with redemption, but with realization. She was never afraid of darkness, only of the truth that the darkness was herself.